Silkworm is something of a hidden gem which released in arcades back in 1988 by Tecmo. It's one of those games where pretty much every system that had a conversion had fairly good versions of it, which is a rarity in its arcade port series of mine. It's a game that I likely bought from a newsagent back in the day from my C64, and a scrolling shooter that I played so much of. I am surprised I didn't actually wear the tape out. It's a standard shoot 'em up affair, shoot down enemies, collect power-ups to give you better weaponry, and make it to the end of each stage to take down a boss. Like I say, I think these days Silkworm is a little underrated, and most talk about games like R-Type or Gradius, which are great games, but this one is very often forgotten about. It even had a sequel known as Swiv, which as a kid didn't realise as Silkworm and Swiv are two different names obviously, and Swiv also looks different with its top-down look. So anyways, this video has dearly been a pleasure to make, and it's lovely to play a bunch of games that are actually very good to play. So as always, start from the worst and working our way to the best. Here we go. I am officially calling the Amstrad conversion Silkworm in Space. Yes, as we play through this, you will notice that we don't have backgrounds as such, but just darkness, which clearly isn't the same as we got in the arcades game. This 1989 Silkworm release isn't actually that bad. Sure, it does slow down when too much is happening all at once, but as we know, these poor 8-bit microcomputers could seriously get stressed out when too much was going on at once. Yes, it doesn't really resemble the classic 1988 game in terms of scenery and silky smooth frame rates, but I wasn't actually that unhappy playing this Amstrad version. It's superb for what it is, and frankly, I've seen a hell of a lot worse on the Amstrad during this arcade port series. It is really nice to control with tight hit collision detection, and although enemy aircraft and tanks don't look much like the arcades game either, they are nicely drawn nevertheless. There is no music here, but I was impressed with the sound effects. It sounded fairly good. It also features a 2-player option, as you will see from the Jeep also being in the gameplay video. Although this game is virtually the same as the Amstrad CPC conversion, in terms of presentation, sizes of sprites and good tight controls, the ZX Spectrum Sport is just as good, only it scrolls better and maintains a better consistency of frame rate. Sure, it does drop a little at times, but overall, just quicker and not as much lag as Amstrad's conversion. Again, we are back to Silkworm in Space with this one. Like I say, it handles really nicely, a 2-player option is here too, and collision detection is pretty much top notch here as well. This version also released in 1989 by the Silkworm. Some might moan that it looks terrible with its monochrome look, but really this is great. You can see pretty much everything happening with this version, with sprites, bullets and missiles are very clear and visible to see. We also have the amazing soundtrack by Barry Leach with this version as the game starts, although I personally think it sounds much better in another particular version in this list. Now, not that there is anything wrong with the Nintendo Entertainment System's version of Silkworm by Sammy, who released this one back in 1990, but as to be expected, we have a fairly standard NES sprite flicker festival here, flickering more than other versions of Silkworm. If you grew up with Nintendo NES, then just like myself, you will find to expect this to be happening in almost all the NES games. It's not a biggie, but of course we have to be practical here and compare it with the non-flickering arcade game. Now, a good feature here is that it comes with in-game music and sound effects, which sounds okay, nothing too special, just sounds like a standard NES game, if anything. Controller-wise, this is nice and fluid to control. Oddly enough, bosses are slightly different from the usual layout, with different ones compared to everything else in this video. But this is a NES game, and NES games always tend to have their own twist on things. Like I say, a great game nonetheless, but certainly not the most faithful or best versions of Silkworm here in this video. Now, many 8-bit micro owners, especially those in the UK who had games predominantly on cassette tape, will exaggerate on loading times these days. Really, loading times weren't as bad as some claim them to be. If you was a Commodore 64 user, you would regularly have some awesome loader music whilst you were waiting for the game to load, with its hypnotizing raster bars sending you into a trance. This was one of those games where it didn't matter if the game took a few minutes to load. Damn, the music by Barry Leach here, it's one of my absolute favourite loading tunes. It truly is just amazing and has remained in my head since I was a kid pretty much. Does the game match the quality of the music though? Damn right it does. Although the Spectrum and Amstrad conversions were great, they were a little on the easy side. The Commodore 64 offered more of a challenge, and as you will see in the gameplay, much more resembles the arcade game than the other two 8-bit computer ports here. One of my favourite shooters on the Commie growing up, right next to Catalypse. It is great to control, offers 2-player, and we have a much bigger gameplay screen to play with here. Everything just looks more spacious, and to my knowledge, there is no frame rate issues here either. The Atari ST's conversion is actually pretty good. Throughout my arcade ports videos, I've generally found Atari ST game conversions to be pretty bad, but no, Silkworm on the Atari ST is a pretty good game to play and looks more like the arcade game itself, where hills on the first stage are present. Sprites themselves are also looking much bigger than the awesome Commodore 64 version. It controls well too, with colours that are doing its best to match the arcade game itself. Sure, this one does have some frame problems, but absolutely nothing like the Amstrad CPC Slugfest. I did find this particular version kind of on par with slighter difficulty level with the Commodore 64's version. I do find it funny to think though that a mere 8-bit Commodore 64 can easily look down over this 16-bit machine in terms of music quality. All in all, not a bad game at all for the Atari ST. In first place today, we have the Commodore Amiga's port. Good lord, this Amiga port is awesome. After all these years and being such a big Commodore buff, this is literally my first time of playing this version here. Now, firstly, we have nothing more than pure silky frame rates with no slowdowns. I played through the first 3 stages, and all I can say is I had an awesome time playing this port. Firstly, parallax scrolling here looks very nice compared to the Atari ST's version. We have a nice big full screen here too. Now, although we don't have in-game music and we have in-game sound effects, these absolutely sound amazing. Sounds very much like the arcade game itself, in which when we destroy an enemy ship, for example, and fly by them, it sounds like it's exploding in a distance with an echo. It's really awesome stuff. No doubt about the sound effects, some of the best I've heard in the port series for the Amiga. It also features a fair challenge. Okay, so the sprites aren't as big as the arcade game, but this will do really nicely for a home conversion. This is a colourful conversion, no doubt about it, and Amiga users back in the day would have rejoiced with this port. So anyways, that's my ranking the Silkworm home conversions today. So which version did you grow up with? Did you have the Commodore 64 conversion, or did you have the more slugfest version for the Amstrad CPC, or was you truly blessed to have the Amiga, the creme de la creme version of Silkworm? Let us know in the comments below as always, and like always, thanks for watching.